Welcome back to the HBCU NFL Report, where we keep you guys updated on your favorite Black college football stars in the pros. I am Symone Stanley. He is Lut Williams, and the first 53-man roster is here. We have 22 HBCU players that made it onto 53-man rosters, but do not fret, because the practice squad does exist, and a lot of these players that were cut will have a chance to be signed to practice squads and can be elevated to the 53-man roster as the season goes on. So just because your favorite player, your cousin, your son, your nephew isn't on a roster right now, that does not mean all hope is lost. Right, Luke?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is just the first round. There are some more to come, so stay tuned.
We had two undrafted free agents from the 2023 NFL Draft that made it on 53-man rosters. That is a huge task when you go undrafted and make it not just on the practice squad, but to the active roster. So let's shout out these two guys. We have Emanuel Wilson, a running back from Fort Valley State University that popped off with the Green Bay Packers. He has his name on the dotted line with the Pack, and also Ricky Lee, an offensive tackle out of North Carolina A&T, who would now be front and center in the trenches for the Carolina Panthers.
Big news for those two guys, not being drafted. You know, as we've reported, only one player drafted all year. So we had, I think, a total of 11 undrafted free agents in camp, and certainly Emanuel Wilson kind of shined in the preseason, had a 100-yard rushing game, 80-yard touchdown run, was leading all rushers in the preseason in rushing. It's going to be very hard for the Packers to keep him off the 53-man roster. And lo and behold, there he is. He's the third running back behind A.J. Dillon, as well as Aaron Jones, I think it is, for the Packers. So I think that probably Ricky Lee, and it's technically is Ricky Lee the third, was somewhat of a surprise. You know, he didn't go in highly thought of, but obviously he impressed Coach Frank Reich. They played at two HBCUs. Emanuel Wilson, before he got to Fort Valley State, played at Johnson C. Smith and starred at Johnson C. Smith, led the CIAA in rushing. And Ricky Lee played 2 years at North Carolina Central, and it's quite strange, but then he went over to that biggest rival, North Carolina A&T, and he started at both places. 2 years at Central, 2 years at A&T. So obviously he has the kind of pedigree to earn starting positions. Even as a freshman at North Carolina Central, he was a second-team All-Big South offensive lineman playing left tackle for the Aggies this past season. So congratulations to those two guys. That's a big deal to make it from an undrafted, not even being 7 rounds, not to make it into the draft, but to make it onto a 53-man roster. So we'll be looking for them absolutely playing on Sundays.
You can't hide talent, Lou. And Emanuel Wilson was, after he went undrafted, he originally signed with the Denver Broncos. He only spent 3 days at the Broncos camp before they let him go. The Green Bay Packers saw what he could do, and now he's on their 53-man roster. So you just always have to take all those opportunities. And the Broncos, I know they're missing out. I know they're mad that they're missing out, because we saw last season how the Broncos offense struggled, and we know they could have used Emanuel Wilson back there.
And, you know, they've talked about that Wilson, obviously he ran very well in the preseason. He's probably going to have to play some special teams, because there's not a lot of third string running backs that get a lot of play in terms of regular downs in the NFL. However, if one of those guys go down, he's obviously shown that he can carry the mail, so to speak, and maybe he'll get a shot to play for the Green Bay Packers. We'll keep our eye on that.
And Ricky Lee, like we said, with the Panthers in his hometown of North Carolina, love to hear stories like that. Ricky Lee is going to have a tall task, and the Panthers are trusting him to protect the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, Bryce Young. So we know how important the offensive line is, especially when you have a rookie quarterback coming in. He's going to need all the protection. So if I'm Ricky Lee, I'm feeling very good about myself knowing that the Panthers trust me to protect Bryce Young?
Well, how about this? The Panthers kept 8 offensive linemen. 3 of them were rookies to protect that golden prize #1 rookie, Bryce Young. 3 of them were rookies, including Ricky Lee. So it's going to be interesting. That means that all of their backups, because you start 5 on the offensive line, all of their backups are going to be rookies, and Ricky Lee will be one of them. So yes, that's saying a lot that they are putting that kind of trust not only in the other 2, but to have 3 rookies, including Lee, that they are counting on the offensive line. So we'll keep an eye on that. And it's interesting because, I was trying to get in touch with Ron Mattis. He's the offensive line coach at North Carolina A&T. He's the one who schooled and taught Brandon Parker, who's been in the NFL, and he has a great record of producing all-conference offensive linemen. I wanted to get in touch with him, but the Aggies are on the road, headed to their first game down at Birmingham, Alabama, Birmingham, Saturdays.
Well, we'll see it on Sundays really soon. We have to shout out another guy who made the 53-man roster. He is not a rookie, but he spent last season with the Dallas Cowboys after being a star for FAMU. Marquis Bell, a safety. He made the 53-man roster after spending majority of last season on the practice squad, barely getting any in-game action with the Dallas Cowboys. So he must have had a heck of a summer, a heck of an offseason in training camp, because now he is on their 53-man roster.
And you kind of could tell that the Cowboys were taking a serious look at him because he was playing a lot of downs in the preseason. I think he had 10 tackles in the first preseason game. He played a lot also in the second preseason game. He played in all 3 games, as did Ricky Lee, and as did Emanuel Wilson. So they were taking a very hard look to make sure that he could handle everything. And everything that I've read about Marquis Bell said that he had shown them that he was ready. We thought he should have been on the field more. But as it is in the NFL, if you get an opportunity to be in the league as a practice squad, do what you can do on the practice squad, basically wait your turn. And that's kind of what Marquis Bell has done. So I would say, from my perspective, it's not a surprise that he's making the 53-man roster. I thought, based on how they used him last year, that he was a guy that they were going to look to in the future to really be a every down kind of player, not just a practice squad player.
And as we get into a lot of these cuts that we saw, Marquis Bell is a great example to look at, because just because you were cut after training camp, after the preseason, and you might have to spend your rookie season on a practice squad, that does not mean that you don't have opportunities to still shine in the NFL. So let's keep Marquis Bell in mind when we get into these cuts, because it was a lot of players that were stars in the 2022 HBCU football space that were released yesterday on the final NFL cutdown day. That includes Aubrey Miller Jr., Jackson State outside linebacker. That includes Shaq Davis, South Carolina State University wide receiver, and Mark Evans, offensive lineman for the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Those 3 guys were guys that we thought we were going to hear getting drafted in the 2023 NFL draft. They went undrafted and they were released, waived before the 53-man cutdown, along with some others.
Yeah, and I think it was the kind of situation that, the guys that we had projected that we thought would get an opportunity that may get drafted were kind of on the bubble, included people like you're talking about, Shaq Davis, Xavier Smith out of Florida A&M, Jadakiss Bonds out of Hampton. And all of these guys did get some opportunities in the preseason. They had, Shaq Davis got some catches for the Saints. Jadakiss Bonds had a big 60-yard or 52-yard reception on the last preseason game. I think from what I've read, each of them has shown them enough to be considered for the 53, but are almost a locks for the practice squad. And particularly about Jadakiss Bonds and Shaq Davis. We'll have to keep an eye on that. I've heard more about Shaq Davis than Mark Evans in terms of being on the practice squad. But even a guy like Andrew Farmer out of Lane, he led all of HBCUs last year in tackles for losses. He had like 23 tackles for losses, I think 8 or 9 sacks. He was playing well for the LA Chargers. He got in and made some plays for the LA Chargers. And the thing about Andrew Farmer is he looks the part. He looks like an NFL player. He's like 6'2.5", 250 pounds. He can run like a deer. Had a couple of tackles for loss and a sack in the preseason. I wouldn't be surprised to see Andrew Farmer also make the practice squad for the LA Chargers.
And Isaiah Land, that's another name we forgot to mention. Isaiah Land, someone who competed in the Reese Senior Bowl. He was a top defensive player in HBCU football and FCS football last season. He went undrafted. That's someone we really thought was going to get drafted as well. He went undrafted with the Dallas Cowboys. He had a teammate on the team in Marquis Bell, and he's another guy who failed to make the 53-man roster, but should definitely be on a practice squad. And we can honestly see him activated or elevated sometime throughout the season, like we saw with James Houston last season, being held hostage on the practice squad. And when he got his opportunity to come in game towards the end of the season, really popped off and solidified himself.
Yeah, and I thought the 11 undrafted free agents that were in camps this year, I thought that we would end up, like I said, we had 31 HBCU players in the NFL ranks last year. So we'll have to see. I think the number is going to be higher than 31. I think that we only lost we lost several veterans who weren't on any camps this year, but one of the guys that we did lose was Bobby Price, a guy who played 3 years in the defensive backfield for the Detroit Lions. He signed this year with the Atlanta Falcons, and he was one of the surprise cuts by the Falcons as they got down to 53. I'm not sure if I think there's some stipulations about who can be on the practice squad. You can only have so many players with 4 years of experience. Bobby may be one of those kids. Bobby Price may be one of those kids that's considered for that, and maybe he'll still land on the Falcons. And as you said, when you get waived, that's when other teams can pick you up. So there are opportunities all around for these guys to still stay in the league.
Plenty of opportunities, and the season hasn't even gotten started yet. We do have to talk about one guy who was placed on injured reserve and is expected to be out for the entire 2023 season. That's Isaiah Bolden, the only HBCU player drafted in the 2023 NFL Draft, a defensive back out of Jackson State University. He had a scare in a preseason game with the Patriots, and I'm assuming that's where this IR placement is coming from.
Yes, that's what I would figure. I wasn't even I thought that he had made the 53-man roster, but when you reported that he was on injured reserve, I'm sure it had to come from that. I haven't been able to see the actual collision. It was a friendly fire that hit him, that knocked him out of that game. They ended up suspending that game. But that's very, very, not a good indication for him that injury or that concussion, I think, as it was reported, has gotten him out for the whole season. So it's very interesting. One of the kids, again, we did mention was Keenan Isaac out of Alabama State, who made some plays for the Houston Texans, but he was let go also this week. So no, not the Texans. I think he was with the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah, Tampa Bay.
And I would not be surprised if several of these guys at least make practice squads.
We have a guy who spent a long time on injured reserve, spent a lot of time injured, who is now trying to make his return to the NFL. We have former Pro Bowler, former North Carolina A&T stud, Tarik Cohen. He has not played in an NFL game since 2020. So he's a running back. He's 28 years old now. Older running backs have a hard time finding spots in the league. What was your reaction to this, Luke?
Well, I was glad to hear that he's even in shape to now his agents, Drew Rosenhaus and another guy, saying that he's ready to try out for teams. I'm sure they will give him a look. I'm sure that based on his production when he was in the league, the kind of dynamic player he was devastating for him to be out 3 years. And not only did he tear up the knee as well as do some nerve damage in the knee, but when he was in rehabilitation, he also tore his Achilles. That's why he's been out for almost 3 years now. So it's been a slow process for him to get back. But Tarik Cohen was the most exciting running back in HBCU football probably in the last 20 years. And was making his mark in the NFL, just signed a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract, which all was guaranteed, which was probably good for him and probably facilitated his being able to rehab the way that he's been able to do over these last 3 years. So wish him nothing but the best from right here in Greensboro, where I live, out of A&T. He comes back here often, And it's good to know that he's back in shape, ready to try out again.
And like you said, this guy is someone who is a Pro Bowler. He's an exceptional running back, but he also is versatile in being a pass catcher as well. So if as the season goes on, there's going to be injuries on other teams. That's just how the game goes. So even if he does not sign with a team before the league starts, throughout the year, teams will have the option to add Tarik Cohen to their roster. So I feel like he has a good chance to make a team before it's all said and done this season.
I can tell you one thing about Tarik Cohen that everybody knows that's either been around him or watched him. He's a small guy, 5'6", maybe 180 plus pounds. I think he's put on a few pounds more than that. But let me tell you, determination is not in short supply when it comes to him. He's overcome obstacles all his life, if you know his life story. And we wish him nothing but the best, hoping that he can get back to doing what he excels at. One of those things is playing football. So we wish him nothing but the best as he tries to come back.
Absolutely. Well, Lou, the NFL season is almost here. One of the last big things before the season starts is the final initial 53-man roster. So we are so close to some NFL football. I'm excited. I know you are excited. So make sure you guys have your notification bells on so you do not miss a single HBCU NFL report all season long. Make sure you are subscribed to HBCU Game Day and also to our website, hbcugameday.com. He is Luke Williams. I am Symone Stanley. Until next week.